The doctor looked me in the eye and said, "Neither of you are his biological parents." And just like that, my entire life cracked open. I'm Rachel. 15 years of marriage, one beautiful son, and what I thought was a solid life. Until my husband bought a DNA kit, and the results didn't just change how he saw me. They changed everything. What would you do if the child you raised wasn't biologically yours, and your husband walked away the moment he found out? This story isn't just about DNA. It's about motherhood, memory, and the meaning of family. Stick around and tell me in the comments, is blood really what makes someone your child, or is it something more? It started over chicken casserole, leftover from the night before, reheated in the microwave, slightly too dry on the edges. I remember thinking I should have added a splash of broth to soften it. I was scraping off the browned bits when Mark said it, like he was discussing a weekend sale or a neighbor's dog barking again. "I got one of those DNA kits," he said, chewing slowly. "Just curious." I looked up, half smiling. "For fun?" I asked, reaching for the salt shaker. "Or are you hoping to find out you're part Viking?" Mark didn't smile back. His fork made a soft clink against the plate as he set it down. "No," he said. I've had doubts, Rachel, since the beginning." The salt stayed in my hand, hovering mid-air. I let out a small, unsure laugh, like maybe I'd misheard. "About what?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked down at his plate and began folding his napkin, one corner over another with surgical precision. Mark always folded napkins like that when he was upset. Tight creases, never a wrinkle. A habit he probably picked up from his father, the same man who never hugged him but taught him how to organize a drawer with military accuracy. "Doubts about Ethan," he said finally, still focused on the napkin. "I want to know for sure." The words didn't hit all at once. They floated in the air, casual and cool, but somehow heavier than anything I'd ever heard from him. Ethan was in the next room, hunched over the kitchen counter, doing his math homework, headphones half on. His pencil tapping a rhythm I now realize I hadn't heard for a while. I stared at Mark. "You're serious?" He nodded once, slow. "I am." "You think I cheated on you? Lied to you?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The silence that followed had a shape to it, wide, jagged, and familiar. I'd seen it before, in small moments. The way he looked at Ethan during school meetings, the way he once asked about the delivery room after too many glasses of wine. But I never thought he'd say it. Not out loud, not like this. I want clarity," he said. "We owe it to ourselves." The casserole cooled on my plate untouched. My appetite vanished somewhere between doubts and clarity. Just then, Ethan poked his head in. "Mom, do you know where the glue sticks are? For the science poster?" I turned toward him. His brown curls were slightly flattened from his headset, eyes bright but tired. I nodded toward the junk drawer. "Middle one, under the scissors." "Thanks," he said, already halfway back to his project. When he was out of earshot, I lowered my voice. "You want to take a test and confirm whether he's yours?" Mark stared at the napkin. "Yes." My mother-in-law's voice echoed in my mind. At our wedding, after the cake was cut and the champagne was poured, she leaned in and said, "Let's just hope Rachel is reliable." I laughed back then, thinking it was a joke, but her eyes had remained still. That night, I lay in bed beside a man who had once cried when Ethan was born. Mark had stood in the hospital room, pale and blinking, tears running down his face as he held that tiny bundle. I remember because it was the only time I'd seen him cry. Not at his father's funeral, not when he lost his job in 2012. Only then. Now he snored lightly beside me, like everything was normal, like he hadn't just placed a fracture right down the middle of the life we'd built. I stared at the ceiling fan, watching it spin, counting the blades. 5. Again. 5. Again. My heart wasn't pounding. It was quiet. Still. Number I didn't cry. Not yet. I just lay there, blinking at the shadows on the ceiling, wondering how long Mark had carried that thought, and why he chose now to say it. Maybe he'd seen something. Maybe someone had said something. A colleague at work? His mother again? Or was it just a feeling? The next morning, Mark got up early, made coffee but didn't pour me a cup. He folded the newspaper the way he always did, vertically, once, then again, straight edges, precise lines. I watched him from across the room, thinking how strange it was to live with someone for 15 years and not see the fracture lines forming until one day. They split open all at once. At breakfast, Ethan asked if we could go to the movies that weekend. I said yes, even though I knew we wouldn't. Mark said nothing, didn't look up from the sports section. 2 days later, we were at the clinic. The air smelled like antiseptic and lemon wipes. A kind technician greeted us with a smile that tried too hard. Mark didn't hold my hand. I kept thinking about the casserole, how something that looked harmless could dry out, crack, and fall apart in the microwave if you didn't tend to it just right. Some things break slowly, and some with one bite. The room was quiet, too quiet for the kind of news we were about to hear. The doctor didn't begin with a file or a clipboard. He didn't even glance at the manila envelope that sat like a loaded question on the desk between us. Instead, he folded his hands together and looked me square in the eyes. "Are you emotionally prepared for what I'm about to say?" I didn't speak. Mark gave a small nod, barely emotion. I just stared. The doctor finally opened the folder, slow and deliberate. The sound of the paper brushing against itself seemed louder than it should have been. "The results confirm that Mr. Alden is not the biological father of your son." My breath caught. I looked at Mark. His face didn't change. But then the doctor kept going. "Rachel," he said gently, "according to this report, neither are you." Time didn't stop, but it shifted. I could feel something inside me detach, floating off like smoke from a candle just blown out. "That's impossible," I whispered. Mark leaned back in his chair, his hands in his lap. "I knew it," he said softly, not angry, not even surprised, just resigned. The doctor cleared his throat but said nothing else. The drive home was silent. Mark didn't speak. I didn't know how to. The rain had started again, soft, like fingers tapping the windshield. I stared out the window, watching trees blur by, trying to remember the feeling of giving birth, what it meant, what it was supposed to mean. At home, Ethan greeted us from the living room. "Hey, how'd it go?" he asked, eyes still on the TV. "It was fine," I lied, "just routine stuff." He nodded and went back to his game. I felt my heart twist in my chest. The boy on the couch with the too big hoodie and the uncombed curls. I had nursed that boy through colic nights, taken him to the ER when he broke his arm falling off the jungle gym. I'd sat through 5 parent-teacher conferences where he was praised for his kindness more than his grades. I had packed his lunch every school day for over a decade. That night, Mark slept in the guest room. I didn't try to stop him. I spent most of the night in the attic digging through Ethan's baby box, one of those plastic storage tubs with a lid that never quite stayed closed. It held hospital bracelets, a copy of his birth certificate, a few tiny socks, things I hadn't touched in years. The bracelet was worn, but legible. Ethan Alden, January 4th, 2009, mother, Rachel Alden. I held it in my palm, waiting for it to explain something it never would. I pulled out the small envelope marked birth photos and flipped through them slowly. There I was, pale and exhausted in a hospital bed, cradling a tiny, swaddled figure. Mark was beside me, one arm awkwardly around my shoulders, eyes wet with tears. But one photo caught me. It had been taken from an odd angle, maybe by a nurse. In the background, just behind my shoulder, stood a young woman, blonde, no more than 20, holding a baby. Her mouth was tight, her eyes wide. Her hospital badge was crooked, the name too blurry to read. I stared at that photo until my fingers went numb. Downstairs, I heard the sound of a cabinet door closing. Mark probably looking for the antacids he always took after stressful days. I didn't go down. Instead, I sat there on the attic floor, my legs folded awkwardly beneath me, holding a picture that suddenly felt like a secret. The next morning, Ethan asked if I was okay. I told him I was just tired. He nodded like he understood, but I saw the way his eyes lingered on my face. "You and Dad mad at each other?" "No, sweetheart," I said. "He's just dealing with something." Ethan picked up his backpack and grabbed a granola bar. "Okay," he said, casual, but there was something in the way he said it that made my heart ache. Later that day, I stood at the kitchen counter, the photo laid flat beneath a small desk lamp. I tried to zoom in on my phone, moving the image around, tilting it, enlarging it, squinting at the badge on her chest. The letters blurred into nothing. But her expression, it haunted me. She looked scared, guilty, caught. In that moment, all the late-night feedings, the lullabies, the fevers, the birthdays, they didn't vanish, but they shifted. Like I'd been walking on a bridge and suddenly realized the supports weren't what I thought they were. A part of me wanted to call Denise or Linda, spill everything, let the words tumble out so someone else could help carry the weight. But I didn't. I wasn't ready. I didn't even know what I would say. I pulled open the drawer next to the fridge, the one with the junk mail, tape, expired coupons, and found the old hospital folder. St. Joseph's Memorial, it read in faded blue. I ran my fingers across the edge, then slipped the photo inside. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said it out loud just to hear the words leave my mouth. "I'm not his mother." Then I said it again, quieter this time. "I am his mother." Both felt true, and neither did. Before I turned off the light, I looked at the photo one more time, zoomed in as close as I could. "Who were you?" I whispered. Some faces vanish with time. They blur, soften, disappear into the folds of memory. But not hers. Hers stayed, like a shadow burned into the wall of my life. I didn't remember her name, but I remembered her eyes, wide, startled, and the crooked badge that hung from her chest like a warning no one saw. I spent hours cross-referencing staff rosters from St. Joseph's Memorial, looking at archived blogs, obscure nursing forums, even yearbook photos from local nursing schools. Nothing came easy, but grief, when sharpened by confusion, becomes a strange kind of fuel. Eventually, I found a post buried in a nursing alumni page from 2009. Mara Penbrook, class of 2008, now working at St. Joseph's, Portland. It was just a blurb, but it was enough. It took another 2 days to trace her to a new last name, Jennings, and a florist shop 2 hours south in a town I'd never heard of before. The kind of place with one main street, 2 churches, and a diner that still served liver and onions. The snow started just as I turned off the highway. It came quietly, in lazy flakes that danced across my windshield. The flower shop sat between a barber and a bait store, its window display heavy with poinsettias and hand-lettered signs about winter specials. The bell above the door chimed when I stepped inside, followed by the smell of eucalyptus, carnations, and something else. Soap, maybe. Something clean. Something trying to mask the past. She stood behind the counter, trimming stems, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was older now, thinner. Her face had grown lines that suggested sleepless nights, and her hands trembled slightly as she worked. Still, I knew. "Can I help you?" she asked, without looking up. "Mara?" I said. She looked up, startled. "Sorry, do I know you?" I stepped closer. "My name is Rachel Alden. I gave birth at St. Joseph's, January 4th, 2009. You were there." The name must have clicked before the memory did. I saw it in the way her eyes darted toward the back room, like she wanted to run but knew she couldn't. She said nothing, just pressed her lips together, cutting one last stem before setting the shears down. "I'm not here to accuse you," I said softly. "I just need you to look at something." I pulled the photo from my coat pocket. the same one that had kept me awake for nights. I handed it to her without a word. She stared at it, then stared longer. Her mouth opened slightly. Then she sat down on a crate behind the counter, knees folding under her like she'd forgotten how to stand. "I remember this," she whispered. "God." The shop had gone quiet, save for the soft hum of a cooler in the corner. Outside, the snow thickened, blurring the glass like the memory in front of her. "You were in room 207, she said. "Emergency C-section. You had complications. We almost lost you." I nodded. "Do you remember what happened after?" She took a deep breath. "2 babies were born that hour, yours, and a natural delivery down the hall. We were understaffed. One nurse was out sick. The tags, crib tags and bands, were supposed to be double-checked, but someone from admin was rushing me. They moved the babies to observation, then back. I thought I had it right." I didn't breathe. "But something didn't add up later that week," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "I told my supervisor. She said it would ruin lives, that if I spoke up, I could lose my license, that maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just new. I was 21. I didn't know what to do." "So you quit?" She nodded, eyes red now. "I couldn't stay. Every time I walked into that floor, I saw your face. I saw the way you looked at him. I wanted to ask 100 things, but I knew what mattered most." "Did you switch them?" I asked, not angry, just tired. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She shook her head slowly. "Not on purpose, but I don't know anymore." Silence stretched between us. She reached into her pocket for a tissue, dabbed at her nose. Her hands were still trembling. "There was another mother," she said finally. "She had red hair, looked so tired. I don't remember her name, just that she had a boy. He wouldn't sleep. She cried a lot alone. Do you remember anything else? A name? Her husband?" "Number just Claire. I think her name was Claire." The name landed with weight. I didn't know a Claire, but now she mattered more than anyone. I stood, unsure what to say. Mara looked up at me, eyes pleading. "I'm sorry. I think about it all the time. Every year on that day. I wonder if someone else is wondering too." I didn't have the energy to forgive. Not yet, but I nodded. I slipped the photo back into my pocket, thanked her quietly, and turned toward the door. Outside, the snow had blanketed the sidewalk. My car sat under a dusting of white, the windshield wipers stiff and frozen in place. I got in, started the engine, and let the heat roll through the vents. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. "Claire," I said aloud, "I'm going to find you. You think the hardest part is discovering the truth. It's not. The truth lands like a stone in a still pond. It shocks you, but eventually the ripples settle. The hardest part is standing on a stranger's porch with a photo in your pocket and a possibility in your heart. The possibility that the boy inside that house might be your son." I rang the doorbell and waited. The wind chimes beside the door clinked gently in the breeze. A tired Labrador lifted its head from the welcome mat, gave me a glance, then dozed off again. The porch smelled faintly of cinnamon and something older, like dust and quiet sadness. She opened the door slowly, red hair pulled into a loose bun, lines beneath her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in 15 years. "Hi," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "Are you Claire?" She hesitated. "I am. Do I know you?" "No," I said, and then took a breath. "But I think we gave birth at the same hospital, St. Joseph's, January 4th, 2009. Her lips parted just slightly. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of a living room, soft light, a boy on a couch, earbuds in, his head tilted toward the TV. "Could I come in?" I asked. "It's a lot to explain." Claire didn't speak for a moment, then stepped aside. "You'd better," she said. The house was warmer than I expected. Lived in. A bit cluttered, but not messy. There were framed school photos on the wall. Kindergarten, 4th grade, 8th. All the same boy, Liam. He didn't look like me or like Mark, but there was something about the way he sat, his posture, the way he tilted his head as he listened to whatever played in his ears, that caught my breath. Claire led me to the kitchen and gestured toward a chair. She busied herself at the counter, reached for a kettle, but then forgot the sugar when she placed the mugs down. "I don't really know how to start," I said. "Just start," she replied, wrapping her hands around her mug. I pulled the photo from my coat pocket, the same one that had taken me to Mara. I laid it gently on the table. Claire stared at it, her expression still. "I think our children were switched at birth." Her hand moved to her mouth. I told her about the DNA test, about the nurse, Mara, about the badge, the crooked name tag, the chaos of that night. Claire didn't interrupt. Her hands began to tremble slightly. She kept them wrapped tightly around the mug as if letting go would break something. "I always wondered," she whispered. "Liam, he never looked like me, or Ray. His blood type didn't match. But the pediatrician brushed it off. Said it was possible. I convinced myself it didn't matter." She paused. "I had postpartum depression. Bad. The first year, I could barely function. I thought it was me, that something inside me was broken, that I couldn't bond with him. But now, maybe I knew, deep down." She got up without another word and walked to a drawer in the sideboard. She returned with a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. She handed it to me. It was a birthday card, handmade, crayon hearts all over the front. Inside, in shaky letters, it read, "To Momi, who always comes back." Claire's eyes shimmered. "He made that when he was 5. After I missed 2 pickups in a row because I'd fallen asleep. I remember crying in the car for an hour that night." The room was quiet for a long time. "Would you be willing to do a DNA test?" I asked gently. She nodded. "Of course." We sat there for another few minutes, sipping lukewarm tea. Liam never came into the kitchen. Claire didn't call for him. "I don't want to disrupt his life," I said softly, "but I had to know." "I get it," she replied. "You don't have to explain." When I stood to leave, Claire walked me to the door. The wind had picked up a little, the chimes now whispering like a distant memory. I paused and glanced through the living room window. Liam was still there, still seated on the couch, one hand absently twirling the cord of his earbuds. He looked up, almost by instinct, and our eyes met through the glass. He held the gaze for a moment, long enough for something to pass between us. Recognition? Curiosity? I didn't know, but it held. Back home, as I pulled into the driveway, Ethan was shooting hoops with his jacket half-zipped and his earbuds tucked into his hoodie. He turned when I got out of the car. "Hey," he said, walking toward me, breath fogging in the cold. "Where'd you go today?" I forced a smile. "I'll tell you soon," I said. "I promise." He nodded, like that was enough for now. And maybe it was. The DNA results came on a Thursday afternoon. The envelope was thick, the kind that carries news that changes things. I stared at it on the kitchen table for a long time before I opened it. The house was quiet. Ethan was at school. Mark hadn't come home the night before. The seal broke with a soft rip. The paper trembled in my hands more than I expected. 99.99% probability of maternity match with subject Liam Blake. I read it again and again, as if repetition would soften the truth. Liam was mine. The boy with the earbuds, the crayon hearts, the tilted head. He had come from me. I texted Mark, then called. No answer. Later that night, I checked our joint account, an old habit from the days we coordinated bills and grocery lists. A motel charge, just off the freeway, then a dinner receipt, then a charge for a florist. I didn't know what made me go. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness, or just needing to look him in the eyes one more time before whatever came next. The motel door opened to a woman, early 30s, dark hair, barefoot, wrapped in a thin robe like she wasn't expecting anyone. She looked at me the way people look at car trouble. Mark stepped into view behind her, hair damp from a shower. "You're not even going to deny it?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. It didn't mean anything. I laughed. A short, sharp thing. Motel stays. Flowers. It meant something. She listens, he said. She didn't lie to me for 15 years. I didn't think. My hand moved before I could stop it. A slap, not out of rage, but finality. My palm stung. I didn't lie, I said. I bled in that hospital. I held our son. Yes, our son, and I loved him with everything I had. Mark didn't speak. He turned, walked deeper into the room like I was noise he didn't want to hear. I stood there for a moment longer, then left. At home, Thanksgiving was approaching. Ethan asked if we'd still do dinner. Of course, I said. Just us this year. I made everything. Stuffing, green beans, mashed potatoes. The turkey came out dry. I couldn't focus. I set the table for 3 out of habit, then pulled 1 plate away. The chair still stayed. Ethan barely ate. He pushed food around his plate, his silence louder than any argument. When the dishes were done, I poured 2 mugs of cider and sat across from him. I need to tell you something, I said. He didn't look up. I told him everything. Slowly. The DNA test, the hospital, the photo, Mara, Claire, Liam. His eyes stayed on the table. His fingers gripped the rim of his mug. So, who the hell am I? He asked finally. There wasn't anger in his voice, just loss. You're my son, I said. In every way that matters, but not by blood. No. He pushed his chair back, the legs screeching against the floor, and walked down the hall to his room. The door closed softly, and I didn't follow. I sat there, staring at the untouched mashed potatoes, now cold and stiff. The candle on the table flickered once, then went out. The next morning, I met Nathan at his office. We filed a formal notice to Saint. Joseph's memorial, legal intent to pursue negligence. It was a formality, he said, but one that mattered. It's like a courtroom, he said, even if it never gets to one. The real courtroom, I replied, is my kitchen table. He nodded, not arguing. Back home, the air felt thin. Ethan hadn't said much since our talk. He went to school, came home, disappeared into his room. He stopped shooting hoops, stopped playing music. The photo on the fridge, the one of us at the Grand Canyon when he was 8, had slipped halfway off its magnet. I straightened it without thinking. That night, as I rinsed out the coffee pot, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Liam wants to meet you. He has questions. They didn't look like brothers. They didn't even speak, but they played. It was an overcast Saturday, the kind of gray that feels permanent in Oregon winters. I packed 2 folding chairs into the trunk, poured hot cocoa into an old thermos, and told Ethan we were going to the park. Why? He asked, already tugging on his hoodie. Just to meet someone, I said. No pressure. Just meet. He didn't ask more. He'd stopped asking questions lately. When we pulled up, the court was almost empty, just 2 worn-down hoops with peeling paint, and the faint sound of sneakers from a kid dribbling alone far off. Claire and Liam were already there. She sat on a bench with her coat pulled tight, thermos in hand. Liam stood beside her, silent. Ethan hesitated before stepping out. His eyes scanned the park, then settled on Liam. They looked at each other like mirrors out of sync. Similar builds, similar silence, but not the same. Claire and I exchanged a glance. No words, just a long, quiet recognition that we were both mothers, standing at the edge of something we couldn't control. Ethan walked onto the court and picked up a stray ball from under the bench. He bounced it once, twice, then turned, shot, and missed. The rim groaned. He caught the rebound, turned toward Liam, and held out the ball. Liam took it slowly. He dribbled, then shot. Swish. No words, no smiles. But something passed between them. They played. At first, just shooting, taking turns. Then a loose one-on-one, quiet, slow, and cautious like the first steps on a frozen lake. But they didn't stop. I watched from the bench, sipping cocoa, trying not to cry. Claire nudged my arm. He hasn't smiled like that in weeks. I nodded, afraid my voice would crack. Neither has Ethan. We didn't talk much after that, just sat there, letting the moment breathe. Later that afternoon, back home, Ethan dropped his shoes by the door. He went out to the backyard while I unloaded groceries. When I stepped out to check on him, he was standing by the fence, the one Mark never got around to staining, where I used to mark his height every year. He had a Sharpie in his hand. I didn't say anything, just watched. He drew a short line just under the mark for 2020. "Liam's," he said, not looking at me. "He's a little shorter." I swallowed hard. "Good eye." He nodded once, then walked inside. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket across my lap. The hoop creaked in the wind, a familiar sound now. The sky had cleared a little, stars peeking through like shy guests arriving late. Inside, Ethan was at his desk, and Claire had texted a thank you. I opened a new notebook, one I'd bought months ago and never used. I began writing, not for lawyers, not for hospitals, just for them. Letters, one to Ethan, one to Liam. Maybe someday they'd read them, maybe not. The porch light flickered, then steadied. Somewhere in town, Mark was probably sitting in another motel room, deciding whether to call and never quite doing it. Mrs. Whitman hadn't reached out. I hadn't expected her to. I looked out into the dark yard where two boys had once played that afternoon, circling slowly around the truth. They weren't brothers by birth, but they weren't strangers either. Some nights I still hear the creak of the basketball hoop and see two shadows moving beneath the porch light, one taller, one quicker, both learning how to share the court. We didn't end with answers, but we began with something just as powerful: presence. In life, clarity doesn't always bring peace, but kindness often does. Sometimes family isn't about who you look like, but who shows up when the game starts and stays when the rain falls. And in the quiet moments, it's not biology that binds us, it's belonging. If this story touched something in you, I invite you to share it. Maybe someone else needs to know that healing starts with a single pass under the same sky.